Many saying Göbekli Tepe is changing the history. That's not true. It's not changing, but it's adding a chapter, and a very important chapter to the history of humanity, and chapter we didn't know that it exists before.
History books tell us that civilization started with farming, but a sealed chamber beneath Göbekli Tepe was finally opened, and it is not what anyone expected. Long before the first cities, someone built a massive, high-tech complex and then hid it under millions of tons of dirt. Why? New evidence from the deepest pits of the site suggests they were trying to contain something powerful, maybe scary, and the real story is finally coming to light. The Hill of the Potbelly. Let's go back to the early 1990s. A German researcher named Klaus Schmidt was looking for a new place to dig. He ended up at a dusty hill in southeastern Turkey. Local farmers called it Potbelly Hill because of its weird, rounded shape. For a long time, other experts just walked right past it because they thought the broken stones on the surface were just old graves from the Middle Ages. They figured there was nothing special to see here. But Klaus had a gut feeling that everyone else was wrong. He looked at the ground and saw something they missed. He saw sharp edges on the flint stones and bits of limestone that looked like they were cut by hand. This was not a natural hill, but a giant pile of secrets waiting to be found. He hired a crew and started to excavate, and within days, they hit something solid. It was the top of a massive stone pillar, and as they brushed away the dust, the pillar kept going down and down. It was huge. It stood over 15 feet tall, and it was not just a plain rock, but was shaped like a giant T. Then they found another one, and another. These pillars were set in big circles. It was like finding a giant stone puzzle buried under the earth, and the most shocking part was the art. These stones had carvings of lions, snakes, foxes, and even vultures. They were so detailed that you could see the fur and the fangs on some of these animals. Simply put, they were masterpieces. Klaus realized he was looking at the oldest structure ever built by human hands. It was thousands of years older than the pyramids in Egypt. It was older than any city we knew about. This discovery blew the doors off every history book in the world. But as the team dug deeper, they realized the pillars were just the beginning of the story. The Younger Dryas and the reset. While the team was busy brushing dirt off those massive stones, they started to wonder why this place was built at all. To find the answer, we have to look at the weather from a long, long time ago. Around 12,000 years ago, the world was finally warming up after a big ice age, and life was getting easier again. Plants were growing, and people had access to plenty of food. But then, in the blink of an eye, everything went wrong. Scientists call this sudden disaster the Younger Dryas. It was like the Earth hit a giant reset button. Around 13,000 years ago, the temperature crashed. It got freezing cold almost overnight. Forests died off, and the big animals that people hunted started to disappear. For over 1,000 years, it was a total nightmare for anyone trying to stay alive. Some researchers believe a comet hit the Earth and kicked up so much dust that it blocked out the sun. Interestingly, the construction on Göbekli Tepe began right as this 1,200-year deep freeze finally ended. Around 11,600 years ago, the ice began to melt, and the world warmed up again. Usually, when a disaster ends, people just try to find food and stay warm. They do not usually spend years moving 50-ton rocks up a hill. But these people did. It was as if they were obsessed with marking this specific moment in time. Some researchers think the long freeze forced people to work together in a brand new way. Before this, humans lived in tiny groups and moved around all the time to find food. But you cannot build a giant stone circle if you are always moving. You need hundreds of workers who you will also feed. And you need a massive plan. This site is the first proof in history of people staying in one place to build something permanent. This, of course, brings up a huge question. Did these people learn how to build because they wanted to, or because the disaster forced them to? Some think the pillars are a record of the comet strike itself, carved into stone, so the world would never forget the fire from the sky. The precision of the stones shows they already knew exactly what they were doing. It is like they were building a stone library to save their knowledge before the next disaster hit. But as the researchers looked closer at the ground around the pillars, they noticed that the most important parts of this site were not actually on top of the hill. The GPR machine started to beep, showing that the real secrets were tucked away in the dark, deep under the floorboards of the temple. What lies below? Curious to discover what lay beneath the surface, these researchers brought in high-tech tools that can see through the ground without moving a single grain of sand. These machines are called ground-penetrating radar. They send signals down into the dirt that bounce back when they hit something solid. The results were enough to make the team jump for joy. The map on their screens showed that the pillars they had already found were just a tiny piece of a much bigger puzzle. Buried under the grass and rocks were at least 20 more giant circles. Most of them are still down there, hidden in the dark, but the scans showed something even more puzzling than the pillars. Deep under the main floor, there are straight lines and hollow spaces that do not look like rooms for living. They look like a giant basement made of solid rock. In some spots, the scanners found deep pits cut right into the limestone bedrock. Some of these pits had narrow channels leading into them, almost like pipes for water. But this hill is in a very dry place with no river nearby. Why would anyone build a complex system for moving liquids on top of a mountain? Some people think these channels were for rainwater, but others have a darker idea. They think these pits were used for big ceremonies that involved pouring things like oil or maybe even blood. The rock floors in these hidden levels were rubbed so smooth that they shine. It took a lot of work to make stone look like glass, especially 12,000 years ago. The most mind-blowing part of the scan was the math. In 2020, researchers from Tel Aviv University used a computer to look at the site's layout. They found that the exact center points of the three biggest stone circles, known as B, C, and D, form a perfect triangle. This shows that the entire complex was planned out as one giant project from the very start. To build something this precise, the creators had to understand complex geometry. This is a type of math that historians thought was not invented for another 6,000 years. It proves these people were not just building as they went, but were following a master plan they made before moving a single stone. They had a plan that used advanced mapping and measuring, and they knew exactly where every stone had to go before they even started digging. This hidden level shows that the site was not just a bunch of random buildings, but was a massive, organized project that took hundreds of years to finish. As the team looked at these maps of the deep underground, they started to find things that the radar could not fully explain. They found physical clues left behind in the dirt that told a very different story about the people who came here. It was not just about beautiful carvings and smart math. The deeper they went, the more they found signs of a very strange and scary obsession with the dead. The cult of the skull. When the workers started sifting through the dirt between the pillars, they expected to find old tools, or maybe some artwork. Instead, they found bones. Lots of bones. At first, it seemed like normal trash from big feasts, but then they started finding pieces of human heads. They were just bits and pieces of skulls scattered around the stone circles. When scientists took these bone fragments to a lab, they saw something that made their skin crawl. Under a microscope, they could see deep, jagged marks cut into the bone. Someone had used sharp flint tools to carve deep lines into the foreheads and sides of these skulls. In some cases, they even drilled small holes right through the top of the head. This was the first real proof of what experts call a skull cult. It seems the people at Göbekli Tepe had a very intense relationship with the dead. They didn't just bury their family and say goodbye, they dug them back up, took the heads and cleaned them, and then they used those carved grooves to tie strings or ropes around the bone. Think about that for a second. While people were singing or praying around those giant T-shaped pillars, there were likely human skulls hanging from the stones, swinging in the wind. The deep lines were probably there to keep the ropes from slipping off. The holes might have been for hanging them up like decorations or even wearing them during a dance. But why would anyone do something so scary? Some think it was a way to keep the wisdom of their ancestors close by. Others think the skulls were a way to mark who owned the land. If your grandfather's carved head is hanging in the temple, everyone knows you belong there. But there is another idea that is a bit more haunting. Some believe these people were trying to trap the spirits of the dead inside the stone circles, so they couldn't wander off and cause trouble for the living. Karahan Tepe, the sister site. Apparently, just 20 miles from Göbekli Tepe sits another site with similar weird practices called Karahan Tepe. It was built during the same time, but has its own unique features. While Göbekli Tepe is famous for its circular enclosures, Karahan Tepe is known for its rock-cut rooms and human-focused art. Archaeologists have found over 250 T-shaped pillars here, some still sticking out of the ground like rows of stone soldiers. The most important find is a large ritual chamber cut directly into the limestone bedrock. Inside this room, there are 11 pillars carved out of the floor. These pillars are part of the original rock and are shaped like upright phalluses. At the end of this row of pillars, a large human head is carved into the wall. It has a long beard and a calm face. This head is tilted slightly as if it is watching the pillars. The room also has a narrow channel that allowed liquid to flow through it. There is a small window-like hole on one side. Researchers believe people had to crawl through a separate narrow tunnel to enter the room. This suggests a very specific one-way path for a ceremony. It was a physical journey that moved from darkness into the presence of the stone head. Unlike the animal carvings at the first site, Karahan Tepe shows more humans. One carving shows a person carrying a large animal on their back. Others show humans with ribs showing or in strange poses. With what has been discovered at this site, we can deduce that the ancient builders were not just staying in one spot. They had a massive, organized network across the region. They were using the same engineering skills to transform the entire landscape. Even though the sites look different, they share a very specific detail on their pillars. The arms and hands are always carved in the same way, with the fingers meeting just below the navel. This detail is the key to a mystery that goes far beyond the borders of Turkey: the hands of the gods. When you look closely at the giant T-pillars at Göbekli Tepe, you realize they are not just blocks of stone but bodies. The top of the T is a head seen from the side, and the long vertical part is the torso. But the most striking detail is found on the sides of these pillars. Two long, thin arms reach down and wrap around to the front. The fingers are long and skinny, and they meet right in the middle, just above a carved belt and a loincloth made of fox skin. This specific hand position, fingers meeting at the navel, is not just a random artistic choice. It is a very deliberate pose, which is strange because you can find this exact same image in places that have no connection to ancient Turkey. If you travel thousands of miles across the ocean to Easter Island, you will see the famous Moai statues. These giant stone heads also have long arms and thin fingers that meet at the belly in the exact same way. The mystery does not stop there. In the high mountains of Bolivia, at a site called Tiwanaku, there are massive stone figures that were built thousands of years after Göbekli Tepe. Even though they are on the other side of the world, their hands are in the same spot. You can find this pose in ancient statues from Indonesia, Tahiti, and even parts of South America. How is this possible? Mainstream history says these cultures never met. They were separated by vast oceans and thousands of years of time. Yet, they all chose to represent their most important figures, perhaps gods or ancestors, with this specific gesture. Some people think it represents the center of human life or a way to hold on to one's power. Others wonder if it is a sign of a lost culture that traveled the globe and taught these building skills to different groups of people. In Turkey, these hands often wear rings or hold strange handbags that also appear in ancient carvings from Iraq and Mexico. At Göbekli Tepe, these bags are carved at the very top of the pillars. Some researchers believe these bags represent secret knowledge or even seeds for farming. The fact that these symbols show up in the oldest temple on Earth suggests that this sacred language of symbols was already fully formed 12,000 years ago. It was not a work in progress, but a finished system. This raises a big question. If this was the beginning of civilization, why does it look like the people already knew everything? But as much as they wanted to show off their art, the builders also wanted to hide it. After hundreds of years of use, they did something that still baffles every scientist who visits the hill. The deliberate burial. After hundreds of years of use, the people who built Göbekli Tepe did something even more shocking than the construction itself. They buried it. This wasn't a slow accident of nature where wind and dust covered the stones over time. No, it was a massive, high-speed project. They moved thousands of tons of dirt and rock to hide every single pillar until the entire site disappeared under a man-made hill. The proof is right there in the dirt. When archaeologists started digging, they realized the soil wasn't natural. It was packed with over 100,000 pieces of animal bone, mostly from wild gazelle and cattle. This suggests that the burial was a giant event. It looks like a huge crowd gathered for a massive feast, ate an incredible amount of meat, and then used the leftovers and limestone rubble to fill the circles to the brim. They were surprisingly careful about how they did it too. They didn't just toss rocks in a pile as we might imagine they would. Instead, they packed the material in a way that protected the carvings. This is the only reason the art is so clear today. If they had left the pillars out in the sun and rain, the soft limestone would have crumbled away thousands of years ago. By burying it, they essentially put the temple in a giant stone safe. But why would anyone work that hard to hide their own masterpiece? Some researchers think the site was a temple for the dead, and once a certain ritual cycle ended, the space had to be closed or retired by covering it up. Others think a major change in the world made the old symbols seem scary or out of date. They didn't want to destroy the pillars, but they didn't want to look at them anymore either. They wanted them gone. By the time they finished, the hill looked like a natural part of the horizon. It stayed that way for 10,000 years, totally forgotten, until a few strange stones were spotted in the grass in the 90s. The effort it took to hide this place shows that the builders were desperate to keep it under wraps. The fact that they went to such trouble to hide these stones suggests they were terrified of what might happen if the site remained open. Do you think they were trying to save these carvings for a future generation to find? Or were they trying to trap something powerful deep in the ground so it could never get out? What do you believe was the real reason they decided to bury their history under millions of tons of stone? Leave your answers in the comments below. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for watching, and if you enjoy this video, please click on the next one on your screen.